Okay, hope everybody had a nice holiday weekend. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 7 o'clock on the dot, and this is the regular meeting of the Kaneland Board of Education. We would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. And now if you'll please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Kleisner.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. Mankowski.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons. Here.
All right, 7 members present. We have a quorum. All right, is there anything that the board would like to move from consent agenda to new business? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
All right, motion carries motion carries 7-0. The agenda has been approved. It is now time for the board/superintendent salutes, and at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Layden.
Yeah, I have one. I talked a little about it before Thanksgiving break. We had on Monday, November 20th, we had our Ignite conference, and that is a district-wide conference that is hosted for our entire staff. We have 350 plus staff members that attend. And Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh are both here. If you would stand for a second to be recognized. I'm surprised they wouldn't have came if I told them it was coming. But Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh put the conference together. It's a lot of work. If you attend conferences regularly, there are 5 or 6 breakout sessions for each time frame, and balancing the types of presentations and the presentations by grade spans. It's a lot of work. It goes out to our entire staff. Our entire staff signs up. Then there's rosters, and like I shared, over 100 of our in-staff, or about 70, 80 of our in-staff presenters present, and they present to their colleagues and peers, and it's truly a highlight for professional learning, professional development for our staff. So we appreciate that day and the Tuesday that the board approves in our calendar for that professional development internally. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your work. It's greatly appreciated, so thank you. Then our next board meeting, we do have our fall athletics and activities that will be coming from Harder and the high school, and also from our Kaneland Foundation. Our grant recipients for this school year will be invited to come and share how they are using their foundation grant dollars in use for our students this school year. So look forward to both of those in December, but that's all I have for tonight.
Okay. Dr. Fuchs?
I don't have anything for tonight, thank you.
Nothing tonight? Okay. Well, tonight's consent agenda contains the following action items. The approval of accounts payable and payroll, November 2023. Approval of the minutes of the November 13th, 2023 regular meeting. Approval of personnel. Approval of the Kaneland High School course book on the second reading. Approval of a bid for KHS water heater replacements. And the following informational items: student suspension data report and the Freedom of Information Act report, FOIA. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. The consent agenda has been approved. So, moving forward, we will proceed to public comments. And we have a few people signed up. So, let me go ahead and read the spiel. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. The board does not debate or engage in conversation during this time. I'd like to remind everyone to state your name and village of residence for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject, and those who speak are asked to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. So if we exceed the 3 minutes, I'll wait to get to a stopping point, but I'll politely ask you to cut it short. So just so you guys know, I'm not trying to be rude, but we're just trying to make it fair for everybody. So with that being said, first up, Amy Corbett.
I have two children. I have a daughter in second grade at Blackberry, and my son Joseph is with me. He's in fifth grade at the academy. I'm also a substitute teacher in the district. We chose Ignite Academy, so the purpose I'm here is to talk about our belief in Ignite and from the lens of a parent and someone who works in the school. We chose it because my son, like a traditional school setting, no longer met his social or emotional needs or challenged him to the fullest of his academic success. Last year, he no longer wanted to go to school, came out depressed, told me that this is just how it is, and as a parent, broke my heart. He's very talented. He's above grade level in some of his academic standards. He's at grade level for others. He advocates for himself. He's inquisitive, motivated to know more and grow. Feedback we used to receive was he was doing very well academically, but wasn't focused. He distracted himself. Others didn't stay in his seat, shouted out answers. Makes sense. He has an ADHD diagnosis. That feedback remained consistent throughout the years, so it really goes to show that a standard classroom structure isn't conducive for all students, even with the 504 plan. From a substitute perspective, I wanted to know what the day in the life of a child was, especially with what my son was coming out saying and how he felt. I was recently an MTSS teacher as a substitute for second and third grade. I walked into the class, I could totally picture where my son would have been sitting. There was a desk that was much higher than everyone else's. It had something, where you can wiggle your feet, which is awesome. They give you that accommodation. But he was also put in places where he was completely separated from other students. So I felt that I could see these kids and I could understand them. And I know I'm gonna run out of time. My son is thriving at Ignite, and I want to clarify that's not where the bad kids go. He's noticeably happier. He looks forward to school, comes home excited about what he's learned and accomplished. The structure gives him the opportunity to learn at his pace. He's been accommodated so that he can be in a sixth grade math class, and he's in fifth grade. He can choose how he wants to complete a project and show that he's proficient. He recently learned how to restring a guitar. He taught himself that. They do have the flexible seating. They could sit alone. They can sit around the room with different, ways of sitting. There's advisory groups. I got to lead one when a teacher was out. It focused on bullying. It's based on topics that are something that they're of interest, and a little girl came up to me and wanted to confide that she was afraid to be on the bus because of being bullied. And I'll just end that when we left my son's 504 meeting at the beginning of this year, my husband and I were just completely floored that we were told that he is one of the hardest workers, most respectful, most polite in the class, and we wish that he could have been there because that is not what he heard at his previous school. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Corbett. All right, next up we have Joey Corbett. No. Well, thank you for attending. All right. Last up, we have Laura Ekstrom. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Laura, excuse me, Ekstrom.
And I live in Virgil, Illinois.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm also here to talk about Ignite. My daughter is in third grade at the Ignite Academy. I also have a second grader who's at John Stewart. And I also happen to be the Ignite PTO president. So we very much believe in the Ignite Academy as a program. I can tell you that both of my kids, my son will be going to Ignite next year. That's the plan. But both of my kids excel very much in math, and they struggle with reading. So Ignite Academy has been an amazing fit for us because my daughter is able to move ahead in math and still get that help that she needs in reading. She has an IEP, so those services are available to her, which are great. And then she also has just made like leaps and bounds of improvement in reading just in the last however many months since August at the academy, because she's given the confidence and the accountability on herself to make those improvements. I can tell you also, not just on the academic side, but on the social emotional side, in a traditional classroom, she was getting a lot of those, well, all the other kids are doing this and I'm the one that's behind, and just very down on herself because she was falling behind on some things. And because of the structure of the academy, there's not that like competitiveness of putting students in a place where they are singled out. Everybody is working at their own pace. Everybody's working on their own stuff and their own project on their own topic. So she doesn't feel like that, that she's being singled out at all. And just, from coming home every day from school crying because she's upset about whatever, to coming home, she can't wait to tell me all the great things that she does at school, all the friends she's making, and just all the great, wonderful things that are happening. So I would like the board to know that Ignite Academy is definitely a needed school in our district. And I told Mrs. Garland, and she wanted me to say, so it feels like I won the lottery when I chose my house, getting to be in the school district to have this program available to us, because it's not something a lot of public school districts have. And it's something that I don't know how else we would have found without getting lucky and where we bought our house. So thanks.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. All right. We have a little bit of time left. If at this time I'd open up to anyone else who would like to come up and speak. No? All right. With no one else wanting to speak, we will move forward to new business. The first item of new business is the presentation of indicators of success, school report card data. And Dr. Layden, please provide some more information.
Yes, thank you. Before Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh come up and share some of the data, I want to give a little background on the indicators of success. We, as a district, as I started into the district, we had, I think it was in the fall, had a presentation of the previous year data, and it was about a 3.5 hour presentation that drilled down on just about every possible data point, every financial point across the district. And then about a year after those presentations, the board at that time asked for something that could be pared down, a little more directed, a little less intense and less time consuming. So indicators of success were created with support and feedback from the Board of Education, presentation to the board to have those, I think it was maybe 7-8 years ago now, approved, and then also through the CAC and the administrative team also to look at those to see what are fair indicators of success for our students. And we've continued that through. And so some of the indicators you will see are direct results from the school report card, and some of them are our own created data that we use in the district. So with that, I know that Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh will talk through some of the information that's indicators of success only, and some of those are also school report card data. So when they finish, Dr. Mum, as you saw, Dr. Fuchs, the last 2 or 3 slides, there's some site-based management and some financials that are included that I think the board asked for. And then also I'll just share some of the overarching district information as well. Teacher retention, mobility rate, some of those factors that are also important, but not necessarily direct academic. Dr. Mull.
Great, thank you. The indicators of success technically are found on our district website. If you go to About D302, there'll be a box that says indicators of success, or in this presentation where it says here is the actual live link. What you'll see tonight is really, for the board, a more comparative data source where you can see the current data, which is live on the dashboard, but we also wanted to include what the cohort trend looked like for the board as well. The cohort trend you can see by kind of rolling over on the indicators of success. You can roll over the graphs and see past year's data. Because we went through a revamp, like Dr. Layden said last spring, there's not tons of last year's data. I think we only have 2 years on it compared to before the revamp, we had about 5 or 6 years that you could roll over and see. So if you're trending to look at a cohort rather than just the 5th grade only data, but you want to see how they did as 3rd into 4th and into 5th, you can roll over the graph and it'll help you see kind of the trend of the data. The point, as Dr. Layden said, of the indicators of success is to give a culminating, summative look at data. It's data that we look at and administrators and teachers look at more in a view to see what curricular trends there are, where we might want other MTSS supports, how to rearrange based on cohorts progressing through, thinking about our teaching capacity, what professional development to grow, but it's not necessarily data because it's in a summative format that we look at for individual student progress or individual needs. We would look at iReady pre and in winter for those needs, but the summative iReady and IAR really are taken last spring and typically reported out in October following. So that's more of a higher level global trend analysis rather than individual student progress. Still very important data. We look at it in a variety of different ways. We do gather educators together as well as the administrative team to ask those questions. What is the data telling us? What does it tell us about our capacity in professional development? Is there a content area that maybe we need to look why, do our assessments not match the one that is given by the state, which is a point that I'll make here in a little bit. Also, again, for MTSS, as we have MTSS staff, we look at where might we place the staff because we have 4 MTSS intervention co-teachers that we can place within grade levels, and we use this cohort data to look at that. We also always look at it just to see and check our curriculum review cycle. We map out our curriculum review for 10 years at a time based on the ability to meet best practices of reviewing every 5 to 7 years. But if Patrick and I look at it and think, wow, we really might have a deficit, we need to dive into math quicker, and we may rearrange then our curriculum review cycles based on this data. So there's really only 2 points that we look at the elementary level for comparison. That again doesn't mean that we don't do a lot of other assessment. We do Rigby, we do writing, we do math common local assessments. All of those aren't on the dashboard, but those are presented to the board in the summary of learning every June or July with the pre and post data that we look at. The 2 that we really identified as indicators of success from conversations with CAC, EAC, and the board when we went through the revamp process were the iReady assessments, because that's a national assessment as well that we can compare to our statewide averages as well as our national averages and then our internal averages as well. And then IAR, the Illinois Assessment for Readiness, which is the standardized test that's given 3rd through 8th grade, typically in the spring. We'll tell you a little bit about the administration as we look at those 2. This one is iReady. It is a computerized test. Students take it on the computer, and it does, as you get questions right or questions wrong, it readjusts and gives you questions over time to kind of find your exact point as a student. On the indicators of success dashboard, we give you the cumulative total for Kaneland, all 4 elementary schools, and 3rd through 5th grade from Kipla, so there'd be 5 averaged in there. We do, as a department, look at it as a breakdown by school, by teacher, but for the indicators of success, you see our global kind of average across the way. A couple things to point out.
Dr. Mum,
Yep.
2 things quickly. Can you, number one, July 31st at that board meeting, that's where you had more of the breakdown by school and more individual data. So
Yep.
If anybody wants to see any more of that data or find that, that would be from the July 31st meeting. And then, sorry, I should have cut you off a minute ago. Can you remind us what Rigby
Sure.
what the Rigby test is for
Yep.
those of us that don't remember.
The three assessments that aren't on here are the math common assessment that is built off of the Illinois state framework, but built by us internally. And it's broken down by each of the math domains. It is a paper pencil test that's given to students at the beginning and end of the school year. The Rigby test is a Rigby published company from the benchmark company, and it's a running record where we have students come to our assessors, take running records, they check off all the words that are read correctly. That's funny that I said read wrong. That are read correctly, and then we do an item analysis for what types of errors they have and ask comprehension questions as well. The Rigby assessment gives you a % in comprehension and a % of accuracy. So you might be an accurate reader, but you're not listening to what you're reading and comprehending. Ideally, you're doing both at the same time. And then the other one that we give, but isn't on the indicators of success, is the Lucy Calkins writing assessment. We do it based on a different genre every year. We have narrative right now. Last year we did informational. We are moving into opinion next school year. And it is based on a published by Fontes and Pinnell Calkins writing rubric. And we have our teachers assess their own, but then also do inter-rater reliability assessments. And those are the ones that you see in the summer with the pre and post data.
Thank you.
Yep, you bet. So iReady is English language arts and math. The data that you see up here is the reading portion of it. Again, it adjusts over time, but is taken on a computer, and the students are required to take it 2nd through 8th grade, but schools can elect to take it in 1st grade. It does have kindergarten capability, but the way that it looks on the iPad is not, I can see your response to it, is not probably developmentally that appropriate for a kindergarten. And when we've had some kindergarten take it, we've kind of looked at it and thought, how much is actually their accurate knowledge and how much is the cumbersomeness of doing it on an iPad or a Chromebook that they're not familiar with. And so we feel we have better assessments for kindergarten, with the kindergarten readiness assessment is something we also use. So you'll see our 1st through 5th grade on here. As you look at the data, I think there's really a couple key points to look at. Obviously, we look to see in 1st grade from, year 1 to year 2, are we kind of maintaining in that same realm? That tells us a little bit about curriculum implementation. You also want to look at the diagonal to see, as a cohort of students, obviously we want them to continue to progress. And so in 1st grade, we want to see that they have moved from 63% to 74% as 2nd grade. That's the same, a similar population. We have move-ins, move-outs, of course, but we want to make sure that the cohorts are continuing to grow more so than just the 1st grade compared to 1st grade. You will see anything that's highlighted in green either has an increase within the grade level from 22 to 23, or the cohort on the diagonal increased. When we look at data, we really analyze if it's an increase or decrease by 1 to 3 points. That's something that I know a past superintendent and I talked about, a little bit of white noise. It could be a factor. It could be a classroom. It could be how I'm feeling that day. It could be I took it after recess. And so those, decreases or increases by 1 or 2 are not something we put tons of work and effort into, because we know that's just the variance in the testing process. If it's somewhere about an increase or decrease of 5 or above, then that's something that's telling us something about a trend. Something that we either want to draw more attention to, maybe that's where we need some intervention, maybe that's where we need some supplemental materials curriculum-wise, if it was a large decrease with the cohort, or we want to break down and analyze with the cohort, what is it that went from A to B, and they had a significant decrease. So you'll see on here we had increases in our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, but as that cohort progressed into 4th and 5th, you saw a big decrease between 3rd and 4th, which tends to be an area that you see I've kind of made my way in learning to read. And then when I hit that 4th grade test, it becomes much more comprehensive on using the text to learn. Instead of just learning to read, now I'm reading to learn, and how can I analyze? And that's where we start to see some comprehension breakdowns. As we have really looked at that 4th grade cohort, we've looked at the ability and comprehension and compared it to our local assessment on our running records, and saw that the comprehension was an area that we really wanted to focus on, as well as some vocabulary and understanding the vocabulary that's used on iReady. And so we feel that we have a fairly good plan working with that fourth grade, that we saw the decrease that they went from third to fourth grade. Yes.
That transition from third to fourth grade, is that something you would expect nationally? Is that just the nature of those grades and that jump?
It is. You see it a little bit on the IAR, as well as the nice part about iReady statewide. We are still above the state averages in iReady, but you do see that kind of decrease when a cohort goes from third to fourth. We've even had some of our teachers look at the third grade iReady test, and just the number of words in the question compared to the fourth grade questions on iReady is significantly different. It's typically a 2 or 3 line question in fourth grade, where it tends to still be the 1 line question in third grade. And so we think there's probably some test analysis structures that we can work on and provide experiences with students. But yes, you typically see that even in the state average, that trend of going down a bit. The decrease of 16 is a little bit bigger than I would say that's typical across the state. So that's something that we definitely want to dive deeper into with a subgroup.
Thank you.
Yep. So then you compare kind of the iReady, which is given again national and state, and you can have those comparisons. And then you look at the IAR. The differences with the IAR is every year, some districts are selected for test batch questions. We did have a selection. We win the lucky lotto every year, it feels like. We had tests. We got the test bank of questions in 5th grade last year in reading, and then in 4th grade and 5th grade in math. And so it's harder to compare by cohort because it's not the same type and structure of test. We got the pilot question tests. And so that tends to skew our data a bit when we talk about the Illinois assessment. It's not the same pool of questions every year. They're trying something new based on the feedback of what they get from the year prior. Again, you can see though, although we took the pilot of the questions, we did decrease by 2, so that really doesn't tell me much of a story. And you can see that we are still above the state averages, which are on the bottom of the slide. We do look, of course, like I mentioned earlier, down as a administrative team to say 4th grade went from 45 to 35, barring taking out the difference in students. How are we implementing the curriculum? And that's when our learning walks have come into play. And this year we're really looking at, as we're visiting the schools and as an administrative team, making sure that we're doing fidelity checks for guided reading. Guided reading includes a shared reading portion, a small group portion, individual conferences with students, and then self-selected practice reading at the student's reading level or by a skill. You could be meeting with a group of students based on a skill as well. And so our fidelity checks have really focused on making sure that guided reading is present in those 4th and 5th grade classrooms, specifically this year after looking at the data. So our last 2 points are the same 2 tests, but in the math, which has multiple domains. When we say domains, it's geometry, number sense, place value. All of those are the different domains. We really take the iReady test and the IAR test and break it even further down into what domains do we have a little bit more difficulty in than others. What we have found both on iReady and IAR is typically the domains that we do mini instruction on in the spring are the ones that we don't fare as well on. Geometry and measurement and time and money, because those are usually our later units of study. The IAR is taken early March and we still have 3 months of school. And it's a cumulative test, so it's assuming that you've had exposure to some of those units, but the state does allow you to take it prior to spring break. We have done the administration after spring break, but we have gotten a lot of feedback from the community that there's a bit of test fatigue when we give the IAR in April and Rigby and writing and the math cumulative test, so we've tried to spread the test out. But the IAR then comes a bit too early because it is assuming that we have gotten further into our curriculum. On iReady, you can see again, we saw 3 increases in the cohort data, which is a very positive trend of making sure that as a cohort, you're continuing that movement up in the grades and maintaining, if not increasing. And then we saw a slight decrease in the 5th grade cohort going from 4th to 5th grade. And then finally, our math, we did not see increases, and we saw some pretty big decreases in our 4th and 5th grade as a cohort, but those were also our pilot test questions. And so I'd love to, I know the state gives out further analysis as we get further into the winter of the feedback just to pilot districts and how other districts that took those pilot questions fared. That's not out quite yet, but I'm very eager to see that, just to see if there's a question on the way that they did the pilots. Yeah.
So you haven't been able to do item analysis yet?
Mm-mm.
When do you expect?
I usually expect it right around the Thanksgiving week. We get the USB key that has more detailed knowledge. They did give us item analysis, but it was only by domain and by writing or by reading type, and that doesn't get us to the exact question. I do know our item analysis for math will be delayed because typically if you're a pilot district, they don't give you the item analysis on pilot questions until after the new year, but I haven't even heard yet from the state when that's coming. Math is an area that, although we are still above state level, the one thing that we did do this year, we started it in the summer and we're piloting it on our own this year, is we decided to take our local assessments, which aren't on the indicators of success, and rewrite some of the questions with some of the IAR mirrored language based on the Illinois state framework. And so we're feeling that our local assessment will give the students more practice to the language that they will see when it comes March or April on the next IAR. And so it's an area that we draw our attention to, but also we have a lot of unanswered questions, especially since we were randomly sampled and selected for the pilot questions. So these are just kind of the summary based on working with administrators at the K-5 level, looking at this data. We also have a collaborative inquiry group, which is about 45 educators from various positions that come together 3 times a year and look at this data as well as the breakdown by school and grade and sometimes teacher. And they ask and pose questions about it and decide if we see one school maybe having a higher success rate, then we hopefully will do some visits at that school. And these were some of the things that we wanted to work on. Like I had mentioned, it's planning visits to schools that are having a little bit better success in some of the areas than others. Looking at our MTSS support, and are there cohorts that maybe need 2 co-teachers and then a cohort that might not need 1. You don't have to place an MTSS co-teacher with every single grade level, but based on student need, and this data helps us do that. And then really looking at our math continuum and trying to mirror that language that they will see on the IAR has been our focus this year. Our initial revision or our initial taking of the pre-test that had the revised language, we're collecting feedback right now on how did that language work, where were the students still showing some confusion. And then we want to make sure that we are really pushing our students to continue through the progression of the domains and not wait for the entire class to move to it, so that those that are ready for geometry, measurement, time can progress a little bit faster and have exposure to it prior to the IAR. Those are our 2 major data points for K-5. Questions?
Dr. Mum, do those data points play a role in the determination of the school improvement plan?
Yep, for sure. I say that the summative ones are probably a piece of it. IAR doesn't, because we need our data to make our school improvement plans over the summer, and our data isn't released until October every year. And so it's kind of a bonus after the fact conversation with our school improvement plans. But we do use iReady as well as our local assessments that we talked about.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, Mr. Russell.
Very similar for the data points and how we use those when we're looking at 6th through 12th grade. We have very similar data points for our middle school grades for 6th through 8th, and then we get into a little bit more detailed data that's collected, that's reported to the state for our high school. So broken down similar between IAR and iReady data for our middle schoolers. And then we look at the available standardized tests that we have at the high school, as well as things like honor roll, access to higher level courses and such. That is tracked, our graduation rate, our freshmen on track, things that I know we've shared in the past, but things we also, data points we also want to reemphasize. A lot of what Dr. Mum said, we sit even a little bit closer than this in our office, so a lot of the planning and the analysis of data that we look at is very similar for our middle schools, and we use them in a very similar manner. We are very lucky at our middle school to have been able to grow our MTSS team, and our iReady data is probably one of the biggest pieces that that team looks at in order to intervene with our students from a day-to-day standpoint. When we talk about our IAR data, very similar to what Dr. Mum emphasized, that is more global, more of a global view. As we get that in the September, if we're lucky, more so October months, we're looking at identifying cohorts of students. We look at identifying our delivery of instruction, resources that we are using as we look to improve those scores. If we jump into our middle school data, laid out, again, very similar. We're going to start with looking at our reading data. Up first is our iReady. So if you look at that bottom line, that 2023 line is similar to what we shared out over the summertime. But then again, wanted to look at how our cohorts are progressing. So if you look at the data that we have for our current 7th and 8th graders, we were able to compare that to where they were last year. We do see slight increases in how they are performing on those iReady tests. We do see, and then again, lined up for 6th grade, we look at just that 6th grade group as we go from top to bottom. So again, a slight decrease from our current 7th graders when they were at 6th grade last year. If we're comparing 6th grade just to 6th grade, we do see a little bit of a drop off there, but as we track those students through and those groups of cohorts through, we are able to see that there is a slight increase in how they are doing on the iReady test. This is reflective of that third administration. So similar to our elementary schools, we do give this as an initial assessment in the fall. We then benchmark again in the winter time, and then for the final time in the spring. This does coincide with the delivery of our IAR. So as you'll see, our data, and I know we've discussed this in the past, our data is not what we want it to be at, but we want to talk about how groups are growing, or we do have a couple of groups that have decreased in the action plans that we have surrounding those. As we look at our IAR data compared to our iReady, we do see, again, similar growth with those cohorts. We saw a strong jump with our current 7th grade and our current 8th grade students. And again, about when we look at our 6th graders, it is pretty comparable to what that 6th grade class has been in the past. Looking at what these action plans look like, we have started to build in. We do not have standalone writing assessments. A lot of that writing is embedded into our reading and our ELA classes. There are writing components that are heavily built into our social studies courses. So we are looking at ways where we can isolate those reading skills at the middle school, similar to how Dr. Mum talked about that shift from 3rd to 4th grade when you're looking at learning to read to reading to learn. You do see a shift in the middle school, and ours typically that difficulty starts to look at when we want to look at inferencing. That is a difficult skill that really starts to take off in the middle school. And then looking at informational texts or nonfiction texts, when we look at citing claims, evidence, and the reasons behind the claims that we're looking at. So what we've started to do for the first time this year with our instructional coaches, with our MTSS staff, with our teachers, is to really look at those student work samples from a writing piece that does have that reading side embedded into it, and really look at the work that is coming in, the samples from our students, and really start to build our action plans, our assessments off of that. So when we look at the types of questions, the expectations that we have for students, and then drilling really into those lessons and those instructions and how we are getting kids to understand what a claim is, how to go back into the text and find that evidence, and then really expanding on that when they talk about the reasoning behind those. As we drill into those skills, we have started to see some more and more success, and we are able to compare our iReady scores to our IAR scores, and we are seeing that steady growth. We did take these assessments. That window for our middle school is the same window at our elementary school. So unfortunately, we do not have an entire year of instruction to look at and pull from. We have about 3/4 of the year. With that, we do have weekly and bi-weekly meetings with our teachers to look at those student samples, to look at lessons. And then our MTSS team is looking at that iReady data to work with teachers, to work with groups of teachers, to work with cohorts of students to help improve that instruction. Our IAR data then we use to look at our reading program in general to see what we need to do to make adjustments to those programs. Looking at that, I know we've talked in the past of looking at different gaps and breaking this down. Through some of this work, we have been able to decrease the achievement gaps with both of our IEP students, our low income students. Nothing monumental, anywhere between 2 to 7% that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, where we've been able to address achievement gaps with, again, our IEP students with IEPs, our low income students, and then some of the more racially diverse subgroups that those tests look at. We've gone from about 28-29% down to about 20-21.
So, Mr. Raleigh, you could get me the data
Yes.
for IEP students?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great. That'd be great. I'd
Yep.
like to see that. Thank you. Thank you.
Moving into math.
Actually, I have a
Yes.
quick question. Are the iReady and IAR tests the same or comparison? Can we take our fifth grade scores and compare them to our sixth grade scores? Because I'm looking at our fifth grade scores and compared to our 2022 fifth grade scores to our sixth grade 2023, and there's decreases on both drastically. I mean, there's like 10 points. So is there work being done for our sixth graders?
There is, and a little bit of that is tied into our school improvement plan. So it's not directly related to the iReady test in itself. It is related to students being able to identify the individual gaps that they need to improve on. And that has really been the focus of our MTSS team. So prior to last year, for our middle school, we had one interventionist that serviced students with reading and one interventionist that was able to service students that had gaps in math, and that was for the entire school. We were able to grow that group to 6. So we have a math and a reading interventionist at each grade span. What they have done is that they've looked at targeted standards, and they've worked with students where it's not just blanket. In the past, prior to last year, a student might have been receiving a blanket intervention for 4 or 5 weeks, sometimes maybe even 6 weeks. What our staff now, our MTSS staff, is able to do is either push into classes because there are more readily available throughout the day, or they can identify students that might only need a 2 or 3 day intervention, a quick reteach of a concept. So we are starting to see some more and more positive growth in our achievement that way, because I can identify my needs might be different than Dr. Mum's needs, and we can intervene differently. And what we've done starting last year with that team is we've been able to align our interventions to what is happening in the classroom. Prior to that, there was a disconnect between the company, the vendor, the scope and sequence maps of our students in the classroom. Those that were identified for interventions were on a separate computer program, and it was disconnected from the instruction that was happening in the class. So what we did last year is we aligned those two things. So the interventions they were getting were directly tied to the standards that were being instructed in class. So we're hoping to see a little bit more of this data increase, but again, something to look at those previous elementary students as they come into the middle school. We'll see it in a few moments. We have identified those students because you'll see some similar data from our 8th grade going into freshman year, and our high school has identified those, and again, through a school improvement plan of freshmen on track, are working with those students. Our math scores, again, we're a work in progress, and this has probably been the area where we are seeking to improve the most. There's a couple things that likely play into this. Most notably, when we go back the last 3 years, we have used an entirely new curricular tool. So the 1920 school year, we went through our middle school math review. And we're starting to come out of that implementation gap, but the professional development, the instruction tied to a new tool, I think played a little bit into these. We also saw that based on the 2021 school year and some of the national trends, that middle schools in particular, when you looked at math compared to reading, in the impact that the pandemic and some of the disruption that happened with the school, you did tend to see, particularly with our 7th grade strands, that math was really, really impacted. The ability to be hands-on, to have manipulatives, to be able to just dive a little bit deeper into some high-end instruction, that's where we saw a greater impact on learning. Again, these students, when we look at our iReady scores, we are able to identify similar standards and connect them to our scope and sequence and our instructional map, so we can start to identify individual students. We're not looking at blanket interventions for all of our kids. We can really dial into the standards that we need to improve upon. And again, those individual intervention plans can be set up with our team, whether that's pushed into the classroom, whether that's pulled out. We also use this data to work with our instructional coaches to identify trends in math instruction, to be able to go into the class and work alongside our teachers.
Mr. Rowley, I know you're going to get to honor roll in a second, but as you look through student groups as they pass through, when there are students that are identified as needing additional needs, how early are those identified in the school year to be able to try to close some of those gaps and work with those students?
Sure. So because of the relationship with our MTSS staff, they do a really, really great job the first couple of weeks going into class and really just building those relationships. Sometimes it's teachers that they haven't had before, particularly with our 6th grade level. So we start, our first administration of iReady usually comes around late September. So we can use that data to help to intervene based on iReady scores. But at any time, once we get into our instruction, a typical school year, we go through all of the beginning of the school year stuff. We do getting to know you activities, building those relationships, which are critically important. But usually about the 2 or 3 week mark into school is when you're going to start to get some kind of work samples back. And over the last probably 3 or 4 years, we've worked really hard working with our students to advocate for their needs. And you'll start to see that early on, usually late August, once we get started with the school year into September, where it's not necessarily advocating for iReady because we haven't taken that yet, but they're getting some kind of grade back where they can go then and advocate with their teachers. We have a lot of kids, again, speaking to the success of our MTSS teams. We do have a lot of students here that identify and self-identify of needing more help, and they will voluntarily ask to go and get increased help with our MTSS staff.
Thank you.
Yes. Yep. We have that MTSS group. We've, over the last 2 years, have brought that K-12 group together. So we are trying to align more and more. We do have a unified school MTSS handbook. So we do bring those coordinators together. I can speak directly. I meet with the middle school MTSS coordinator here almost weekly, and I know the work that she does in meeting with our 5th grade teachers to pull some of that data. She works very closely with our high school MTSS coordinator. So that's really getting into the minutia of student names, specific tests, specific standards that we have identified that show when students are trending successfully in these 3 or 4 standards, we can then usually identify them for particular courses at the high school. Last but not least, looking at that IAR data again, this is a year later. We saw success with our 6th grade group and the jump that they made as 7th graders last year, with almost a 13% increase in how they did. Looking at that, our 8th grade cohort, there was that slight decrease, as we've said, and we'll take a look here in a second. Those students have been identified. This is a single data point, but there are multiple data points when we identify students on a warning list, on when we identify students that we want to make sure are not falling through the cracks, that may not necessarily be self-advocating or seeking out those interventions. We want to make sure that they still don't go without. So this is a data piece that we will use in the first semester at the high school, having identified these students. But again, looking at the 18%, we want to make sure that we are looking at our instruction. So when we are going and doing our learning walks, we're taking a look at what's happening compared to what is outlined jointly as a group of what a standard is, what it looks like to be proficient in that standard, and then really starting to have some deep conversations around the assessments that we use, not necessarily copying or mimicking an IAR test, but want to make sure that our students, there's not a disconnect between what is being asked of them on that test, of this specific test, and what is being asked of them in the classroom. So we're looking at some of those pieces. We are looking at, we're doing more and more where we're doing some vertical articulation. So we're looking at work between our 5th grade teachers and our 6th grade teachers, our 8th grade teachers and our 9th grade teachers to start to look at what exactly is being addressed, how it's being assessed and instructed, to make sure that that is as seamless as can be from the middle school through the high school levels, and we understand where students are at in 5th grade when they're coming to the middle school. Really leaning into our MTSS, really leaning into our instruction. Between our department, we've worked with our instructional coaches in the instruction that's happening, the professional development that's happening. This is on the radar with meetings that I have with myself and our building principal on how we can problem solve to make sure that we're setting our kids up to be as successful as possible. The interesting piece, what we'll look here in a minute, is again, being a valid data point when we look at, again, globally what we use to make some decisions. There is a disconnect when we look at our local data. So our local data, again, is what we call the day-to-day instruction, the day-to-day quizzes, tests, projects that our teachers are creating or our teams are creating. And we do see a significant higher level of success with that day-to-day instruction. There's a couple thoughts behind that. Number one, those formative and summative assessments, some of those practice pieces, the feedback that's associated with that, those are directly tied to the instruction that is happening in the classroom, and that is critically important. It follows exactly our scope and sequence. It follows exactly our proficiency tables. So the evidence comes from when I can sit down and have a feedback conference or a small group conference with a group of students and specifically talk about a standard, what that means to be proficient in that standard, and provide feedback to that student and start to build an individual plan, an individual path for that student. We do start to see far greater success. The other part that we see is these scores. So what you're looking at are students that at any time throughout the year have either earned honor roll or high honor roll. So this also accounts for a full year of instruction. So this goes through the end of 4th quarter, where the previous 2 data points usually happened in March. Still doing an analysis on that when we look at 2/3 of our 8th grade class that has earned some type of honor roll achievement, compared to 18% of them meeting and exceeding the threshold on the IAR data. There is a disconnect there. So continuing to look at what is happening in the classroom, how are we assessing compared to how the state is assessing, and making sure that we're aligning those 2 pieces together, so we start to see our standardized state tests resemble more of the success that we're seeing on our local assessments. Yes, sir.
Is honor rolls every quarter? So does this add up? How did you make this?
Yep. So this is so yes, a student has 4 opportunities to be on the honor roll or high honor roll. So those numbers reflect any student that had achieved that throughout the year on any given quarter.
So if you got like an honor roll in 1st quarter and then high honor roll 2nd quarter, you're just in high honor roll in this?
Yes.
Okay.
And Harder middle school enrollments between 950 and 1,000, correct?
For this class, it was closer to 900. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Again, looking at, again, celebrating a little bit on the growth that we've seen, but knowing that we're not where we want to be at. This summary is looking at some of the action plans that we have. Similar to what Dr. Mum said, we are part of our middle school and our high school are part of that collaborative inquiry group. So we do have a large number of teachers that are really drilling into and diving into this data and creating action plans. That work is really, really meaningful because those action plans are able to be instituted this school year. So we're getting real-time data from our kids and able to build some plans to go back and impact our instruction in our class. Other pieces that we see based on some of the data that we shared, number one, we do have targeted funds recently approved for our ESSER 3 grant, where we can start to look at underserved populations for tutoring. So we've identified some of those students, we've identified some of those teachers. So looking at building a tutoring program to meet some of the individual needs of our students. We are continuing to advocate for our students to seek help through our MTSS team. We are continuing to work with that team to partner up and take on some co-teaching roles, but really leaning into that robust team and the 6 of them in conjunction with our 2 instructional coaches, our behavior facilitators, and the teachers that we have to build those individual plans. Any questions on the middle school data before we head into the high school? All right, our high school, we do not have iReady. That is not, it only goes through 8th grade, so you will not see an iReady score. We do not have the IAR. We do have some standardized tests to look at, but again, those aren't blanketly given to an entire grade span. So we'll look at a couple different things. Number one, we'll jump right into looking at our SAT scores. The bottom line, that 2023 year is not new information. We were able to share this out. What we were able to do though is look at the state average in comparison to where our students are at. And then we can also look at how those classes are growing. So difficulty here is that we can't compare cohorts. This is so that 2022, that was our 11th grade class. 2023 is our 11th grade class. They don't take it again as seniors, so we can't see how students have grown on this. We have similar comparability between the PSATs, and we are seeing similar data. We just don't have as robust of reports. Those cutoffs are a little bit different. So we've only looked at the SAT scores. We do see trends and an increase in our PSAT scores. So when we talk about our 9th and 10th graders, we're seeing similar trends as they increase. So if you look at 22 to 23, you're talking about a 6 or 7% jump there. You can compare that to where our state is, and Kaneland is usually outperforming our state. Important to know, again, we want to continue to look at this. We want to continue to grow this number. The SAT, that test is written and administered by a company called the College Board. They also oversee the AP classes, the advanced placement classes, the curriculum that is associated with this. The threshold for meets and exceeds from the College Board, in particular so EBRW is evidence-based reading and writing. The threshold that company sets for their scores themselves is 480 points. The threshold that ISBE sets is 540. So when you look at our 2023 score, that 41.3% of students that meets and exceeds, they are meeting and exceeding the threshold of the state of Illinois. Not necessarily, it's not the threshold that the College Board sets. If we looked at, and we don't, and I want to be fully transparent with that, this is, our indicator is looking at how our students are performing to the state's threshold. But if we look at the threshold that the company of the test itself sets, our students in our reading and writing are at about 66%. We're at about 65.5% that are meeting that 480 or higher. So we do see some successes there. With math, again, the state of Illinois, it's not that drastic with math. It's only about a 10% difference. So that bumps our 37% up. It is closer to the mid 40s, low to mid 40s on the number of students that are meeting and exceeding the College Board threshold for those. Again, in full transparency, this is the state and this is what we operate off of. This is what we want to improve, but we do see some successes when we look at the threshold set forth by the College Board.
Mr. Raleigh, do you know why there's such a discrepancy between the College Board and the State Department?
I do not. I've looked through the ISB's presentation and they give a threshold through for the PSATs from the 8-9 all the way through the SATs, and each grade level in the state of Illinois is slightly higher. I believe it's just because ISBE wants to hold itself to a higher standard. I'm going to be completely anecdotal here, but I've read some things and the research isn't recent to this year, but I believe Illinois has about the fifth, or there was a study done 3 or 4 years ago looking at state assessments and things like this.
Sure.
And Illinois ranked fifth at that time of the most rigorous tests given.
I was just going to ask you national trends, so
Yep.
it seems like we're at the higher end nationally too.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. It's interesting when you look at things like Common Core. They're not common. Common Core is written for the 2 largest publishers of textbooks in California and Texas, and then each state adapts those Common Core standards somewhat. They will do the same for what our benchmarks and what our thresholds are for meeting and exceeding.
It's also interesting because students are competing nationally to get into universities, to get into colleges, right? And so, yeah, it's interesting these thresholds are so different. Thanks.
Welcome. The next data piece is one that we want to continue to see grow. So we did hit a snag in our course offerings a few years ago, but we are starting to see a rebound. So this indicator looks at the number of students that are taking high level courses. This could be done either through a course that is offered through our Kaneland coursebook. It also reflects the students that are taking advantage of some of the upper level classes at Fox Valley. But we want to keep an eye on the number of students that are taking AP courses, dual credit courses, or advanced certification courses. And we have seen that number jump up about 4%. Our hope is as we approve the final approval today for our dual credit math courses for Waubonsie for a new AP psychology class. We have similar conversations happening in a couple other departments. We really want to grow our course offerings so our students are getting used to college level work here in Kaneland to prepare them as they go on to their next level. Not just college level courses. Again, some of those advanced certifications, we have students at Fox Valley that are really thriving in national competitions. They're coming away with certifications to be very, very successful as 18 and 19-year-olds from their experiences that they're having at Fox Valley. So we want to make sure that we're able to continue to offer those high-end level courses to our students. So this is an indicator that we have of tracking the number of kids that are taking these courses. Similar to our harder local assessment in the honor roll, we'll take a look at our honor roll here at the high school, but really wanted to do a breakdown of our grade point average. Most students tend to fall within that 3.0 to 4.0, or based on taking an AP course. An AP course is the only way right now that kids can get above a 4.0 grade point level, grade point average, but really the bulk of our students are falling between that 3 to 4%. 3 to 4 points on the grade point average. What we've seen over the last few years is a significant decrease in those students that are really struggling. So students that aren't registering a credit to those that are not successful with multiple classes that would fall to that 0 to 1.0 GPA. We've seen that cut almost down to 1%. Which is a huge success. We're getting kids in school. We are intervening with them. We are setting action plans up for them. We've seen that level at that 1 to 2 mark be fairly consistent, but then we do start to see those students that are matriculating up to the 2s, 3s, and 4s. That is growing higher and higher over the last few years. So we're starting to see a rebound in some of our students. We're starting to see the impact when we talk about freshmen on track and the focus that that has and the individual intervention plans that we have for students. We are starting to see more and more successes. Pair that with the number of kids that are taking higher level courses over the last couple of years, we're starting to see some good things that are happening locally with our kids here in our course selections. When we pair that with our freshmen on track, I know Dr. Horn had the opportunity to share out some of the work that his team is doing at the high school. Freshmen on Track is a national indicator. It's a study that originated out of Chicago Public Schools. I believe, I'm probably going to butcher this, but they looked at a significant number of freshmen that weren't graduating. Their freshmen on track when they first started tracking it was, I believe, in the 20s and 30s. And they started to put together a team that looked at specific kids, specific courses, and wanted to make sure that if students were significantly at risk if they were failing more than one course freshman year. So that study looked at how to intervene with those, and the study found it balanced not only academic, but really the support students have, and that's what we want to emulate here. We want to make sure that with the work of our behavior facilitators, with the work of our MTSS team and our teachers, that we are able to support our students. Our freshman on track hovers right around the 88% mark of the students that are passing the vast majority of their courses, and that they are on track. That number has plateaued a little bit, and Dr. Horn has shared that is of interest to the school. So this is the direct school improvement plan for our high school team, is looking at that. Typically what you'll see is a correlation of if 88% of our freshmen are on track, you typically see a graduation rate of around 88, 89%. We'll take a look at ours. I amended the presentation and want to make sure that we're sharing that tonight because there was an error in what the state reported, and our graduation rate is actually higher than what is on this slide or the slide that you have that I can call attention to. But if you look at our graduation rate, that 90% is not accurate. Now that 90% is pulled from our state report card. It is not data that we share. We share how our students have done. They look at all of those grades, and the state of Illinois issues a graduation rate. When we went in and looked at that data, because you can see there's a drop of 4% there was some concern to us. There was an error in the percentage that the state calculated. So when we broke this out, the state of Illinois has Kaneland students that have an IEP, their graduation rate at 55%, which would have dropped down what is typically about 94, 95%. The students in Kaneland High School that have IEPs, all but one graduated. So that itself is upwards. I think there were 34. So 33 of 34 students that had an IEP graduated last year. So there was a disconnect between those two numbers, which brought that number down. If you factor that number in, which we have shared with the state of Illinois, that bumps that graduation rate back up to about that 95%. The other note that was originally on there, what the state has done, so this graduation rate looks at students that have come through 4 years here at Kaneland High School. The state of Illinois also does an adjusted graduation rate, so it does take into account students that have individual plans that may require a 5th or a 6th year based on special needs. When you factor in those, so when we look at the full scope of servicing our students, our graduation rate is about 96%. Sometimes, and if you go back to 2020, 2021, sometimes that's upwards of, I believe, 97 was the highest I saw. But we do have a significantly higher graduation rate than our freshman on track rate. So that shows that our team here is doing a really nice job of identifying those students and making sure that we're setting up individual plans for them in order to be successful.
So this accounts for a student who started as a freshman and went through all 4 years and then graduated.
Correct.
What if they transfer out or something like that? Do they get taken off the list or out of this calculation?
Yes, it would not impact us if
Okay,
they left.
just making sure.
Yep. Last but not least, we're looking at our honor roll, and this emulates the Latin honor system. So our honor roll has gone through a few changes over the last 4 or 5 years. It is previously the previous 2 years. This honor roll has been called the Knights of Distinction. Prior to that, Knights of Distinction had a different description. It was looking at well-rounded students in academics, fine arts, extracurriculars, and really in talking with some parent groups and talking with some students, this has evolved. So you will see a high honor, a great honor, and an honor roll. And those are aligned. If you look at the bottom, with honors is a 3.9 to a 3.99. With great honors is 4.0 to a 4.09. And then with the highest honor is 4.1 or higher. And we do track that by class. So you are, we do have a significant number of students that are in our honor roll system. And that's a high threshold. When we're looking at a 3.9 to higher than a 4.1, this gets really, really interesting to break down and look at, because it gets into like a 4.136874, and it goes into the thousandth place. And a lot of kids will compete to have that highest GPA, but we want to make sure that we are honoring and noting the successes of a large group of students. Last but not least, a similar focus. Again, I think it's safe to say we're never satisfied with the data that we have. There's always room for us to improve. A couple pieces on here of note. We want to make sure that as we go through our day-to-day instruction, we are continuing to focus on those individual feedback sessions and individual instruction with our students, because student A is different from student B. So we want to make sure that that is the main focus of what's happening day to day in our classrooms. Number two, I believe it's been suggested in the past, we are looking at, so we do have those similar tutoring funds through ESSER 3, and we are able to utilize a significant portion of those funds at our high school in order to look at SAT prep tutoring. So we do want to note that. And then we also want to make sure that it's not strictly set aside, that batch of money is not strictly set aside for just students preparing for the SAT. So we do have a portion of that that is directed to just tutoring in general of students. We want to continue to make sure, as noted, that we're continuing to offer more and more high-level classes for our students. So when we look at things like prerequisites, and we want to make sure that we're making every opportunity available for our honors classes, our AP classes, our dual credit classes as kids progress. So that will be a continued focus at our high school, and looking at the different departments when appropriate with proper certification. We want to make sure that we're offering more and more AP and dual credit courses for our students to be immersed in that type of instruction. Any questions for our high school data? Yes.
So forgive me, I guess there are no dumb questions, but forgive me if this is an ignorant question. But I've seen this for the past 3 years I've been on here, and what I see as I go throughout these things is that there's a lot of comparison to the state average. Is there any way going forward we can see a comparison towards the like top 10% performing schools to see where we land on that spectrum? Only because I personally would like to see, I don't want to say raise the bar, but I'd like to at least set expectations higher to where we can, you know, and I'm not saying that, it's hard to know, you know, I understand that average is average, but averages can be skewed by very low performing districts. And so, you know, is it possible to start getting an idea for where we are in terms of progressing towards, you know, those upper echelons, if you will, of districts in the state?
Yep, absolutely. And I will let Dr. Layden share in a moment, but that 3.5-hour meeting did have a lot of that comparable data. And what we boiled down, we can track down most of that. What we have is a set of, I believe it's 12 or 13 comparable districts. And I believe the board at that time set stretch districts, if I'm correct, in looking at some of those higher performing, higher achieving high schools. So we did indicate some of those years ago. We can look at that list and start to pull some of that data. It's interesting. We meet monthly with the curriculum directors from Kane County, and they all use data in a variety of different ways. I know when we were doing some presentations in the years past, I reached out, and one school I knew always had it for me. Others, they didn't use that data, so they didn't share that. So for what we have as our indicators, most of them have a comparable data point. The state data for sure, the SATs, the AP scores, a lot of what's on the state report card we can pull, but I can start to put together that list. It would just be a balance of what that board would want, because I believe, Dr. Layden, if I'm not mistaken, the length of that meeting was comparing a lot of Kaneland, but Kaneland to a lot of other school districts.
Yeah, that's
So-
exactly what it was. This was about a little less than an hour on just the indicators. The other presentations were about 3.5 hours. So there was just a lot more data. So what we'd want to probably talk about is, as a board, which of the data you want from comparable districts, which one you might not, and what we can pull to have that information. So as you talked about that, President Gonzalez, we can talk about that moving forward, because one of the things we shared, one of the goals for this year and moving forward was to have more academic related results and presentations. And if you remember from July, we had that. July 31st was extensive. Then the school improvement plans had that, and then again tonight. So we can look at those and see which data you might be more interested in for next year, and other comparison for indicators and or the school report cards.
And I think the other thing too, Mr. Raleigh, is I don't know that it needs to all be presented either.
Okay.
But if the data points are there, obviously it's something that we should be able to, we could quickly look at and do a quick comparison too. So you don't have to do 3.5 hours of presenting this. So we can just go through it. I mean, obviously we all see this, before the meetings anyway. So we're going through this beforehand, typically have some questions ready to rock, So, I mean, if that's the case, we decide on, hey, we want to see these 3 other schools in comparison to the state, as well as what we're doing here in Kaneland. And then we can come, armed with a few questions, or, get some feedback from you, or even, front load and send some questions ahead of time.
Yep.
Just so you're ready for that. So you don't have to spend all the time kind of going slide by slide and presenting everything.
Yep. And I know we can share out who we typically compare to.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that'd be really good, especially around our area to see.
So our comparison would not strictly be to Kane County. It would be to.
Correct. We have a comparison list that I can share with you in the weekly update.
Okay.
Just
It's actually gonna,
that's what
I
we
have
use.
it on my slides.
Oh, that's right, from the financials.
Okay.
Nice segue, Dr. Fuchs.
No, I think it's a healthy conversation to have, and really, at least I don't want to speak on behalf of the rest of the board, but from my perspective, it's not necessarily, hey, we're here, do better. It's what can we do as a board to facilitate that and move towards that goal.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So it's a bit of understanding on our part, but also setting the expectation and then driving towards that. Is my perspective.
Piggybacking on that, and at the risk of extending the meeting, so I like what Ryan said, I like the idea of maybe putting this stuff, maybe we can update or something like that, and then maybe we can bring those questions later. But I would also like to see longitudinal data. Like I do struggle with the 2 to 3 year trend, right? A 2 to 3 year trend. I know it makes sense to us personally because our children are in the school for shorter time, but I would love to see long-term trends and see where things have gone for maybe 10 years, right?
Okay.
See how a 10-year trend is going. So I think there's a conception of, oh my God, the last 2 years have been so terrible. You look at 10 years, like, wow, we're really kind of in the same flux we've always been, And I think those longitudinal ones are really
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
So, the site-based expenditure, slides are not in your packet, but Jackie's gonna print those out while I start talking. The board had asked for 2 comparisons, and so that's what these next 2 slides will show you. The first slide is from 22-23, and it's all of our Kaneland schools. This is last school year. This information is off of the Illinois report card. Sorry.
Competing.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And so the first slide that I have for you has all of our Kaneland schools, Kaneland High School, Kaneland Harder Middle School, John Shields, McDowell, John Stewart, and Blackberry. The first question many of you had was, how much are we spending per student? And so these are the comparison amounts. They range, the high school is the highest per student because it offers the most services and opportunities, followed by the middle school. And then our elementary schools range between $13,892 and $15,934. Thank you, Jackie. With that being said, a lot of you are curious or have been asking how much Ignite per student we're spending. And we will be able to know that at the end of this fiscal year because the data is on the year prior. But our initial estimates suggest that it will be somewhere between our elementary schools and Harder Middle School. So we'll know that again next year this time after the fiscal year is over. But until then, this gives you an idea of our Kaneland schools. You can see the various enrollments in our Kaneland schools, with the high school being at 1,202, all the way down to our smallest elementary school, which right now is McDowell at 389. I've also included 3 demographics that may be of importance to you. Our low-income students, the percentages in each school, and you'll see that they really do vary, but not that significantly. And then our English learners, and then lastly, our students with IEPs. Again, all of this information is from the Illinois report card, and it's just pulled together for you on this table. The next slide, these are the districts that you're asking about, Mr. Mankowski. These are the districts that we use to compare consistently. So academics, financially, and some of these other comparisons. Some of them are in Kane County, while others are in surrounding areas, and the majority of them are of similar size. Our spending per student is listed near the third to the bottom. It is highlighted for your review. Our enrollment is there. We are on the smaller side, with Sycamore still smaller than us. Our low income students is right in line with the others, with 2 exceptions. Geneva has the lowest percentage and DeKalb has the highest percentage of low income. With regard to English learners, there are 3 of us that are at 2.7 or 2.8%, which is very low. And then your higher is in DeKalb. And then students with IEPs, you can see we're at 13.8, but when you look, you've got 4 schools right there at the bottom, Geneva, Kaneland, St. Charles, and Batavia, all within the 13%. So it's very, very comparable in our nearby area with regard to some of those demographics. So what I would say is these are the districts that you can expect to see on any comparisons. If there are other districts that you're curious about, like the stretch districts, we're going to need to get those data sets pulled back out and take a look at. That's all I have.
Thank you for that information. Just a few things that I wanted to share in addition to that. Some of that from the school report card mirrors that our low income as Dr. Fuchs just shared, is at 15%, and it's been between 13 and 15%. As Dr. Lawler, you asked for longitudinal data. All of this data is about 5 years that I looked at. So our low income has been between 13 and 15% for that 5-year period of time. Our students with IEPs, as Dr. Fuchs just shared, is 13.8, and it's been between about 13 and 15 also for that same 5-year period. Our ELL, as Dr. Fuchs shared, is up to 2.7%, and as you saw, McDowell was the highest, and that was corresponding to the growth there, and as you saw, that request for extra staffing at the last meeting. So you see the relationship to those. Student attendance across the district is up to almost 94%, which is up 1% from last year. So our student attendance continues to increase. And a positive data point too is that our student mobility is down underneath 4%. It was about 4% last year, but that's been between about 3.6 and 4% also. So all of these data points that I'm sharing are very consistent across the 5-year period that the school report card has the trend and look back data for. And then our teacher retention, which is our last piece, is up to 93% from 91, which was also at 90 the year before. So our teacher retention rate continues to increase, which is a great factor for a district also, because that stability that we have in our buildings from year to year from our staff is also essential. So those are just some of the data points that I pulled. But again, this link to the Kaneland School District will be posted on our website, but we wait till after this presentation annually. Our webmaster will have that up tomorrow, probably by tomorrow afternoon, and you can find it there. Or if you just go to the Illinois School Report Card, put our district in, you will find the left-hand column, there's about 10 or 15 categories and 10 or 15 sections or subgroups under each of those categories. So there are hundreds of data sets to look at, from the financials to the academic, the teacher background, staff background, administrator background, years in the district. There's a lot of information to find above and beyond just the test scores that we spent a lot of time on and the financials. So moving forward into the future, we will talk more about this presentation and what kind of comparable data you want and the longitudinal data that comes with it. We want to make sure that we bring that district or that information to our board as the board is looking for. So with that, what other questions might you have? I know we have some feedback, some notes to take, but any other questions on any of the data sets, information? All right, thank you.
All right. Well, there's no action item for this this one. It's purely informational. Thank you, Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh. Appreciate the information. Dr. Fuchs as well. And Dr. Lee.
Minimal, but you're welcome. Yes.
Okay, so we'll move forward to the second item of new business, which is the approval of donation from the Hansen family for the KHS track program. Dr. Fuchs.
Yes, thank you. We had a generous donation from a local family. It's the Hansen family. And they made $1,000 donation to our high school boys track program. We'd like to ask the Board of Education to approve that donation and accept it on behalf of the boys track program. And we're very grateful for the support of this family.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, at this point, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education accepts the donation of $1,000 from the Hansen family for the KHS Boys Track and Field Program.
So moved. Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
All right. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank
The
you, Hansen
motion
family.
carries. The Board of Education accepts the $1,000 donation from the Hansen family. That concludes new business for tonight, and we'll move on to the superintendent reports. Dr. Layton.
Yes, thank you. I have two updates. Next Monday night is our quarterly Hall of Fame committee meeting. And as a reminder, Board Member Mankivsky, they're on that committee. That's at 6 o'clock at the district office. And the major purpose of that meeting is to look at our candidates for the Hall of Fame for this year. And the application period closes on the 30th, so it just closes in a couple more days. We review all of the packets, make sure all the packets have all of the information necessary, and then we do our formal voting in February. Then the second thing that I have for tonight, also on Monday, David Chavez and I, our Director of Communications, will be attending the LUDA Director of Communication meeting on Monday. That's the first time we've attended that because it's the first year we've had the position. So we're looking forward to see what our LUDA comparable districts share as far as their communication, what they target, how they target information across their districts. And there's always good information to take away from LUDA, as it's I think the 53 largest districts across the state and what they do and how they communicate. So I'm sure we'll have some takeaways from that and some new information to share after that meeting. So thank you for attending with me, David. I don't know if you had a choice, but thank you for coming along with me. I appreciate that. That's all I had for superintendent report or superintendent updates.
Dr. Fuchs?
I just wanted to let the board know, I have a finance advisory committee meeting that's of our community members. There's about 10 to 12, and it will be Thursday, December 7th. That's prior to our next board meeting. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that it was available. If you're interested in attending, please let me know and I'll make sure you get a agenda.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right, Katie, you're up.
Okay, good evening. For students across the district, this was the first day back from Thanksgiving break, and actually starting this week, students will begin the process of selecting courses for the next school year. Even during Thanksgiving break, student athletes practiced and played in games. For sports updates, boys varsity bowling fell to Sycamore 6-4 and LaSalle Peru 10-0. Boys sophomore basketball fell to Geneva 63-30 and Huntley 40-32, but beat Prairie Ridge 61-46. Boys varsity basketball fell to McHenry 83-41 and beat Wakanda 53-48. Girls JV basketball fell to Geneva 46-31 but beat Plano 42-17. And girls varsity basketball beat Plano 62-36. And then, as previously mentioned, the Magical Dinner is coming up fast. Tickets are on sale now through Thursday, December 4th at 6 p.m. or until otherwise sold out. The time slots for the Magical Dinner include Friday, December 8th at 7 p.m., Saturday, December 9th at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m., and Sunday, December 10th at 2 p.m. This event is held in the KHS cafeteria, with tickets being $28, including both the dinner and performance. I'm happy to report slots for the blood drive on Friday, December 15th are almost filled up. Both staff and students can donate, but a reminder for students still interested, you must be at least 16 years or older to donate and can only donate during a non-academic period. And lastly, for seniors, a friendly reminder that the deadline for ordering caps and gowns is tonight, November 27th. Thank you. That is all.
Hopefully they're watching.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so I guess for the board report, Mr. Kleiser and I had the opportunity to attend the JAC conference, joint annual conference this year, which is put on by, well, our portion was put on by the IASB, the Illinois Association of School Boards. And so we just kind of wanted to give a little follow-up. It was Dr. Layden, Dr. Fuchs, Mrs. Bogan, sorry for pointing, Dr. Horn, and Dr. Atkins that were in attendance. So Ryan, you want to discuss?
Yeah, so I got a opportunity to hit up a couple of different breakout sessions. Most importantly, though, I was the delegate for our school board at the IASB delegates meeting. We discussed it at the last board meeting. The 5 new resolutions that the IASB were recommending all passed as their recommendations. So they did not adopt the industrial construction. They did adopt the school resource officer funding. They did adopt the bus driver regulations to reverse it back before 2023 was passed or changed. They did not adopt the employment history review, and they did not adopt the alternative safe school funding. Now, I was asked to kind of follow up with some discussion. Unfortunately, there was no appeal, so there was no further discussion actually at the delegates meeting. So I did not get any additional information behind that besides what was already in our packet and what we discussed. A few other opportunities I had. I attended a school safety with Dr. Fuchs. What I found really interesting about that is what we're already doing in Kaneland is very much aligned with what they were talking about for as far as an active shooter drill, how we go about, locking down, or if you can actually escape and get away. But the big message on this one was, what do we do after the fact with the reunification? Where's the meeting point? How's that coordinated? Having all the right people in the right places, verifying that the child is going with the right parent, with having officers on site to kind of help, manage the crowd. There was a lot more to think about than I've ever thought about. So I got a great opportunity to talk to Dr. Fuchs about where we're at with that. I attended collective bargaining because that's where we're at right now. Just a little bit more for my knowledge and understanding of how this kind of goes back and forth. Obviously, at the end of the day, it comes down to making sure that we have a positive agreement for our community, especially for our teachers, and what's going to benefit the students more than anything. But it was a really nice perspective, seeing kind of and hearing from both sides of it, of how everything goes down. But the way that we do it here, I know in Kaneland, it's a lot more of a back and forth of discussion versus demands, and then I'll get back to you in a week and everything. So that was really cool. Other big one that I wanted to touch on was it was successful boards and board meetings and becoming a board member. And we did have a checklist for an effective meetings checklist. And we hit, I think, out of the 26 points, I think we hit every point except for like 2. So I found that really encouraging of how we're operating at our board meetings. And the 2 points that were hit was actually, I don't even know if we have this, but it was a board policy manual available for reference, and then parliamentary procedure available. And I'm assuming we do have that somewhere, or maybe we don't, and maybe that's something that we can implement. And then the one other thing was communications. How do we communicate better with with the community? And all the different points that were brought up are things that we're currently doing within our district and as a board, and from the superintendent level. So it was really cool to see where we kind of measured up to what other school districts were doing. I got to talk with a bunch of different school board members from different places, heard some war stories and some horror stories. So like I said, it was very encouraging. For my first year on the board, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of things coming at me. So getting that opportunity to go rub elbows with other school board members and some of the other cabinet members and administrators was really interesting. I learned a lot. There was a ton of booths for school safety stuff, to electric buses, to, I mean, if you could think about it, really cool AstroTurf, new gym floors. I mean, if you could think about it for a school, it was available there to buy. So we'll see what comes up in referendum discussions. So, but yeah, I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to do that and represent the board, especially as a delegate this year. So thank you guys.
Well, as much as we'd love to take credit for the hitting all the points on the checklist, we really have to thank prior boards, because I'm sure it was a culmination of years of learning. So yeah, I attended as well, and for those of you that don't know, this is really, I don't want to say it's our only opportunity, but it's our primary opportunity to gain professional development in the world of school boarding, if you will. And so every year I try and build from it. This year, because I'm new to this role, I try to focus on board president opportunities. So my first day was a session on the board president role, and attended with Dr. Layden. And it was interesting, focused primarily on communication, the board president's role. And then at the end of the day, we had a nice talk with legal on OMA. So it was good to hear a lot of that information. The next day, we talked about the referendum, went to a really, really informative referendum session, get a little bit of understanding on the voters and strategies and understanding for how to push forward, especially during these troubling times. So definitely some key takeaways from that. and so very valuable. Afternoon was a board president's roundtable, which is nice because you get to sit with other board presidents and hear. It's nice because when you go to these things, you for those of you who don't know, it's so it's really easy to sit from the balcony and say, well, I could do this, but until you're in the role and you're actually consumed, you don't really see everything that it entails. And it's nice to know that there are others out there that are sharing the same experiences. They have the same struggles, and so it's really a good support system in those terms. So it was nice. It made me feel good about our board and confident that we're in a good spot. I'm really grateful to have each of you here and the way we work together. So my big takeaway from that was that, I don't want to say it could be worse because it sounds like, we're not, but we do a good job. We're doing well. Then the last day was board member parent hat, which is a hat I wear every day. And again, informative because there are parents that struggle with wanting the best for our child, but at the same time, we wear that hat as a board member, and it's something that we never take off. And so, valuable. It was all valuable. It was. It's a good thing. I encourage those of you who have the opportunity going forward to give it a shot because definitely an opportunity to grow as a board. So, yep, that's all I have on that.
All right. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for allowing several administrators to go along. And I'll kick off from the administrative standpoint. I appreciated attending the board president workshop with Adam. It's important to be able to learn and hear what's important to a board president from the superintendent role because of our close working relationship, how to communicate, how to make sure that we are communicating with each other and then with the rest of the board and the administrative team. So that's always helpful to see and hear that. As Board President Gonzalez shared, I also attended the referendum workshop, which was really good because it had about a 10-question quiz that I can share some of the quiz questions with you, and basically what demographics people are looking at, what are big keys in a success. So a lot of the information that we've discussed before, but it reinforces some of those and what community members need to know and how they can learn to trust the district better. Who's voting and how often are they coming out to vote. So good information. Another takeaway was a legal update. Always appreciate attending the legal workshops. The state of Illinois and all states change regularly and what they are expecting, what they're looking for, and the laws that change that govern school boards and school districts. So that's always a good takeaway. And then another one was just as part of that legal workshop was a series of legal situations and how you should best handle those from students with IEPs to financial decisions to lawsuits, just the best way to work through those, again, in a quiz format to see how you're doing. It's amazing how many people, when you have a room of like 70, 80, or 100 people, and they give a quiz and they ask for the answers, nobody's willing to raise their hand. Everybody has thoughts, but just like when you're back in school, everybody's looking around. What is everybody thinking? Nobody wanted to raise their hand. So it's always good that they give that immediate feedback to be able to let us know what the answers are and what's happening legally. So good for me, good opportunity to learn and work with the board members that attend. So again, thank you. Dr. Fuchs, do you want to share your workshops, please?
Thank you. As Mr. Kleiser said, we went to one of the school safety it was a half a day session, so it's a little bit longer. A part of that session was the reunification plan, which, as Mr. Kleiser mentioned, we've been working on ours. And so we still have work to do because it's relatively new, but nonetheless, we are in the process of doing that with our security task force that meets almost monthly, but not every month. So probably about 7 times a year. And I thought they did a nice job at the end when they did the hands-on part to give people who weren't familiar with it an opportunity to see exactly how it would work. I thought that was very valuable. Then I went to a couple breakout sessions, one on negotiations and trends, and just hearing how important it is to work hard at the table with regard to things like inflation and building relationships and developing trust between the two teams. So that was very good. And then the last one that I went to was on safety, and this was put on by our West Aurora colleagues, and it talked a little bit about what they went through when the forgive me, but is it Henry Platt? How do you,
Yeah,
Henry
on Prairie and Aurora.
Yeah, when they had that shooting there, and so my colleague was at the was presenting, and then a couple other people that I'm familiar with from the Kane County Safety Team that I sit on, and to listen to what they went through, how they did it, and what they would do different. I found that to be very valuable as well. So mostly with communication. You can communicate, but it's just never enough, fast enough because of texting and everything else. So very interesting. So thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Want to go to Dr. Atkins?
Yep. Dr. Atkins and then Jackie Bogan, but please go to the microphone, of course.
You'll need to. Okay.
Just want to echo a word of appreciation for allowing us to attend the joint annual conference. As mentioned, it's a great opportunity to hear from our colleagues, find out what's going on. I had the privilege of attending 4 different sessions, 2 bargaining sessions, a safety session, and then a leadership session. The leadership session focused on expressive and receptive communication strategies for board members and cabinet members in dealing with the public, staff, students, each other, and gleaned some helpful tips, strategies. They made us record ourselves speaking. Challenge.
Yeah.
Do it. It's eye-opening for sure. The safety presentation that I went to was by one of our longtime friends and advisors, Mr. Paul Tim, and he talked about moving safety conversations with school staff away from the wagon wine, don't leave the doors open and that kind of thing, to more of an embedded conversation. Had some specific strategies that administrators could use with their staff in large at staff meetings, many of which I know that we currently do already, but there's always that opportunity to improve that communication about school safety. The 2 bargaining sessions I attended, one was with Board Member Kleisner and was about some common strategies, tips, techniques, things to be aware of when bargaining, reinforcing the idea that a successful bargain really stems from a long-term relationship with a union and our labor groups versus we're bargaining this fall, let's start talking. No, it's an ongoing conversation that grows and develops a relationship. And then I attended another breakout session in the afternoon on Saturday that was a joint presentation from an attorney, Mr. Braun, whose family and law firm publishes the School Law Survey, which is like, if you're familiar, it's the School Law Bible in Illinois. And then Sylvia Rios, who is the chief legal counsel for IEA. And they jointly shared some specific trends, legislative changes, and legal decisions that have come out very recently that will impact the state of bargaining across the state of Illinois, and how that interplays with IELRB, which is the Illinois Employee Labor Relations Board, the rules we use to bargain, and then all that coming to what do you need to know and be able to talk about and discuss with your labor groups in future bargains. So very informative. It was really good to hear from Mrs. Rios as far as being on the labor side. In conjunction with Mr. Braun. That was very helpful to have kind of both perspectives, and they interplayed very well with each other. But very informative, very helpful, very fruitful information for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Jackie Bogan.
I had the opportunity to attend 3 sessions at the joint annual conference this year. One was on collective bargaining and negotiations, one was on referendum, and then one was on K-12 policies that are happening in Springfield right now and are also expected to be happening at the spring session. Probably my biggest takeaway from all 3 of the sessions was how they were put together. The joint annual conference really does bring together administrators, board members, all sorts of folks from across the state of Illinois who are serving in many different roles in different capacities for their districts. And so I thought it was really interesting in all of the sessions that I attended. there was a very, there was multiple perspectives shared at each session. Each session, it wasn't just one person, and an attorney talking about collective bargaining. It was someone, from labor, someone from management. There were all these different perspectives. The K-12 policy, I thought they did a great job. They had people in different branches of Illinois government. They had across political lines. It was just a very diverse group, and I think that's really important. I think my biggest takeaway from that was the importance of having all of those voices and all of those perspectives shared. So it was really impactful. But thank you.
No, it was also a great opportunity to interact out of this environment and be able to talk one-on-one and socialize, because we're confined to these realms here, and so no, it's good. It was fun. So thank you all for coming, and thanks for listening. All right, so then it is now time to move on to topics for future agendas. Is there anything anyone would like to bring up? I'm gonna go with Mr. Lawler first, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Dr. Lawler, excuse me.
We had talked about this before, and I brought it up a couple of meetings ago about the idea of kind of recreating that experience we had at the CAC meeting a few weeks ago, and I didn't know where we're at with that. I would love to see some kind of form or some kind of way of recreating that, because I thought it was a really positive experience.
Is there, from an administrative standpoint, is there a specific topic or genre to put into play to utilize that? Because I would hate to bring the group back together without a formative activity or experience or feedback that we're looking for.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think it's like herding cats if you just let us all out. Right? So,
I was not saying that, but yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
Give us an activity, help us focus. Yeah. I don't want to dictate that, but
Okay.
I just like the experience part.
Okay.
The topic, I'll talk about anything.
But because I can share with you that as the board direct administration to look more to referendum information.
Yeah,
So I do know that that is a pending topic that we will use for that format to be able to get interactive real-time feedback.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe we could collaborate on topics, but I think referendum's a good place to start, especially get early on it, because we're gonna start talking about it fast and heavy pretty soon. And then maybe open it up for, if we want to continue to do this,
Sure.
a new topic going forward. That's my
I think we just went through the report card for the district and everything, so that might be a topic that would be nice to sit down at a couple tables and get the public back around and have a discussion about that, kind of their perspective, where they're at, what they're thinking as well.
Sure.
Just get a little more feedback.
I have three things. Where we are right now, just an update on the dual credit and Dunham Foundation, approaching the Dunham Foundation. All right. Where we are in terms of expanding, we had talked about expanding those opportunities, expanding those offerings for the dual credit with Wabansi. We talk about Aurora too, or possibility?
Wabansi, yes, we talked about
With
that for sure.
Wabansi. Okay. Where we're at on that. Number two, an update on where we are with the transition to curricular grading. The transition from SBG to traditional curriculum-based grading.
Yep.
Number three, I think it's time we haven't done this for a while, at least not since I've been on the board, a discipline policy review. Because there are all sorts of, I hate to use the word landmine, but out there, but without it updated and really thought out, I don't think it's been reviewed and thought out, as best I can tell in going through minutes in the last 4 or 5 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't see anything. It's been a while. And
Are you talking about the student handbook has to be updated each year. So the January CAC meeting, we get feedback from CAC, then it does come back to the board for formal approval, if that's what you're referring to.
I thought you meant, we used to get like a we used to get a presentation, it used to be done by the deans and the counselors.
Yeah.
Right, that was a while ago.
Mhm.
Is that what you were talking about? Maybe I'm talking.
I'm concerned in that there are issues that seem to be reoccurring where disciplinary issues are getting to the point where it's interfering with students' ability to learn, the teacher's ability to teach, and how we address that as a board without micromanaging.
I think, Dr. Lloyd, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Fuchs, right? A lot of these things have broken off into different pieces now, right? So like we get like an update about SEL, we get an update, like I think there's so many different, we don't think of it the same way as we used to, where it's like, here are the 12 rules, break any of them, you're gone, right? We have this more complicated web now, right? Is that
Yeah, we do have, and it's been either April or June, because sometimes we've waited to the end of the school year to make sure that we have all the data. There have been reports that were brought back to the board, you're right, you're correct, from the deans or the assistant principals with SEL data and student discipline data. So if that's what you're referring to, we have the student handbook reviewed annually, and then in June, I believe, is when we typically would bring deans, assistant principals to share discipline numbers, referral numbers, Swiss data. That's typically a June, I believe it's generally a June report, because that culminates the end of the school year. Then we're able to pull that cumulative data.
Did we have one last summer?
I don't recall last summer, and I don't, from what I'm seeing, we're having issues. It's interfering with students' ability to learn and teachers' ability to teach. And is there something we could and should be addressing to improve students' ability to learn, teachers' ability to teach? And if we don't address some of these, will it put us in a trick bag for what I've experienced other places? It just concerns me.
So maybe can we have a discussion around what the current discipline policy is, and also the outside, the looming cloud over our head of Senate Bill 100, and our limitations. Maybe have legal there, but just get an understanding for what the policies are in terms of punch a kid in the face, what happened, what's the procedure, truancy, all the different factors, and that's primarily at the high school level. But I'd like to get an understanding of it, and if there are improvements we can make from a board's authority, what can we do? Whether I believe policy.
Yeah. And I'd love to have, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'd love to have input from parents, from other educators. I lived this for 20 years. And from what it's starting to reach a point where it's become a lot more difficult for educators to do their job, for students to have the opportunity to learn, and how can we address that from our policy? And, I can give you numerous examples, not necessarily applicable here. It's just something I want to guard us against.
If we're looking for stakeholder feedback, do you think that then that's an opportunity to piggyback on Dr. Lawler's earlier suggestion? I mean, do we start with, so I would think we have a review, and then maybe we start with having a CAC style, I don't know what we're gonna call it, it's obviously not CAC, but CAC style type event where we give, the community an opportunity to come discuss. We
Yeah.
invite.
It's a discussion we need to have.
Can we utilize, because typically we use the January, like I shared, the January CAC meeting and do the same thing in that format, because that's because we're legally bound to have our student discipline code of conduct reviewed annually, and we've used CAC as our parent feedback group, and then we bring that back to the Board of Education for approval. But is there a different way that sooner, later? It can't really be sooner because we only have one more meeting before break, and then January we have CAC. So how do you want the CAC information brought back? Because generally, whoever attends CAC brings back an update. But are you looking for more than just an update?
I would love to have input at the CAC level from parents, from educators.
And I think even from a student perspective,
Yeah.
Especially at the high school level, I don't know, I mean, middle school too, I don't know how elementary school feedback would be. But kind of, I guess, the climate of the high school, right? From a disciplinary standpoint, from how students are treating other students, how students are treating staff, especially, and I think teachers. And just maybe a little bit of feedback on from a high school perspective too, from a student perspective.
And is there something we could or should be doing to optimize both student opportunity to learn as well as the result, the learning experience?
Now, are we talking back to kind of from, what was that, last meeting where dress code was brought up, or the cell phone usage was brought up, or AirPods were brought up, or attitudes, behaviors towards students?
I'm not into getting that granular.
Oh, okay.
I'm not into it. Are there some concepts that we might want to look at or might be effective? But I think it's time we go ahead, we have another look, solicit the opinions of all the stakeholders, students, educators, and
I agree with that. Only a logistic thing. Like CAC has its own kind of charge and its own duty, right? So I don't want to have us
hijack.
I didn't want to use the word hijack.
It's the right word. I don't know at all.
Yeah, I don't want to hijack their meeting and be like, we as a board have decided this is what we're talking about. You know what I mean? I am concerned about that because they have their own thing, right? So.
But the topic is already
That's already there
a
for
placeholder for every January to talk about their, review it, and then bring it back to the board.
So maybe it'd be okay.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be imposing on, wouldn't be imposing on the CAC time, because it's a topic that is already on the January agenda.
the situation dictates it. Circumstances are pushing us towards it. And I don't think, we can't ignore it.
I agree with you, and I also think involving community stakeholders, parents, not only allows a dialogue to have a conversation about what we think our expectations should be, but also then to solicit the help of parents, right? I mean, we can't solve this discipline issue alone. We need their help, right? We need whatever we come up with to be reiterated at home. Like, that partnership has to be working. So it's an opportunity for that too. So I think it's good.
I think through the superintendent search, we've created the groundwork or the framework for this type of thing. So I think, while we have it in place, we should run with it, because especially if one of our themes is that we want to, have a better connection to the community, engage in the community. We've already set that. So do we need to have a consensus for any of them? Or because we didn't even do the. Is everyone okay with the
dual credit was already brought up at the last one, and I can find out directly through Dr. Horn and Mr. Raleigh if there are students that are needing or wanting signing up for dual credit that need the financial assistance, and whether or not Dunham Fund or some other fund would be able to help. So we will look into that as students go through course registration, because I think course registration, Katie might know, started today for juniors or tomorrow? Started today, so we will find out shortly which students are applying and which students that might need supports. Then the standards-based grading, I will provide an update in the weekly update on that one. I know that Mr. Raleigh's been in touch with, talking for you, but you're right here, but you've been in touch with the middle school and high school staff with the preliminary next steps, but I'll make sure that I also get something to the board too, to know what communication is taking place.
And I have one topic, if you guys. So,
Yes.
No, of course.
we've heard a lot about freshmen on track and TSS, but a lot of us, our kids have not even gone through any of those. Can we somehow have some presentation of like an example of a student that has gone through an MTSS track, how they're identified, what do they get, what does it look like for that student or a couple of students, and same thing for a freshman on track? Is that something, help us to understand when you guys are using those terms, what does that look like? And again, so how we can support you win these programs and support the staff that's doing those programs.
I would imagine you're on support to hear that at a future update. I think that one would not be really a weekly update. That'd probably be more of a presentation to have maybe Patrick and Sarah or one of the principals share what it looks like maybe for an elementary school, middle school student, and then a high school student, how the student is identified with characteristics, data, attendance data, academic data, and then what the steps look like, and then what it looks like through a successful path for each of those grade spans.
In layman's terms, like we're first graders, please.
I'll see if I can partner with one where you're already here, but we'll see if you need to come to another. But I have those all noted. And that there's a consensus on all of them, correct?
Yes.
There was, okay. Yep.
Okay. Anyone else? Last call.
Well, that's why. Look at her.
All right, it's time for round 2 of public comment. So we have a couple people signed up. I'm not gonna go over it again, but the same expectations apply. And so, Mrs. Corbett, you're up first.
Thank you for having us and the opportunity to talk. The last thing that you talked about putting on your future agenda.
Could I bother you to jump up to the microphone just for everyone at home?
Sorry. Okay, so the thing that you just mentioned, putting on a future agenda about safety, discipline, interfering with learning, is honestly one of the factors of why we changed our homeschool and went to Ignite. So that's on top of wanting a personalized learning experience. I know Joey has decided that he does want to talk, so you'll hear a little bit about that. I just want to also give a shout out to Mrs. Garland. She is exceptional. One of the things that she's been great at is taking parent-student feedback. She told me from the beginning she wants to look at an issue from a place of curiosity and then figure it out instead of, somebody's in trouble right away. So that was awesome. Like I said before, educational settings, there's really not a one-size-fits-all, so it's a blessing for us that we have this in our district. When you talked about the data points, what I am really interested in, I know you said some of it's in the July information, but what I'm interested in is you take my son who was in 4th grade at Blackberry last year. Where did he line up with 4th graders there? There's change over the summer. Where was he when he did the testing at Ignite for 5th grade compared to every other kid that's in 5th grade in the district? And where do you end up at the end of the year? Can you prove some more success that other students have improved in reading and other academics? And also just, solidify why this is here for the personalized learning. You may have remembered that I came to one of your board meetings during the pandemic, and I asked why we couldn't use the Meredith campus to allow more students to be in person. So I'm really happy to know that we're utilizing a building that we maintain, that we have to pay utilities on anyway. You're not tearing it down, you're using it for an awesome resource. I think there's great opportunity to expand it. The last thing I wanted to say is after the parent-teacher conferences for Ignite, on a Kaneland Moms Facebook page, someone posted just how happy they were about, you know, coming from that that meeting, and something that really resonated. A parent said, my child can learn the way he needs to learn, at the pace he needs to learn, and is accepted, welcomed, and belonged. And I can't agree more. I mean, that is to a T what I feel about for my son, that he belongs, he's accepted, and again, Ignite's not where bad kids go.
Thank you, Mrs. Burbett. Don't worry, Joey. I'm nervous every night I come up to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Joey Corbett, and I live in Auburn, and I attend Kaneland Ignite Academy. And I think that it has changed my academics. I feel more comfortable at this school but the thing I love most about this school is that I can have more time if I need to do my work, and the teachers support me and everyone else much more than the school I went to before. I feel like they have made me feel so much more happier to come to school and so much more successful. At my old school, there was some things that happened that I didn't feel like that they were fair. Like, there was this thing called the reteaching room, where if you weren't good one time in the week, you had to go on a Friday instead of going to a reward. At one time that happened to me because a sub misheard me, and I had to go and miss out of a whole school reward instead of just a normal one, and I was the only kid that had to sit out. But one of the kids that got suspended, he didn't have to go there, and he was able to go. And that just made me feel so sad and mad. This is why Ignite feels much better and makes me feel so much happier and successful.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, I'll open up to anyone else who wants to come and speak at this time. Yeah, no kidding. Thanks for coming up. We appreciate it. Okay, so I guess that's it. At this point, we'll move forward to closed session. The Board of Education is scheduled for a closed session to discuss the Illinois Open Meetings Act, Section 2C2 and Section 2C1, where there will be no action taken following the session. Therefore, after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss Section 2C2 and 2C1 at 9:12 p.m.
So moved. Second.
All right. And a roll call, please.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye. All right.